The flames roared like wild beasts across the wreckage of Outpost 17, casting long, angry shadows through the jungle trees of Urix 3. Smoke twisted into the sky like ghostly hands, reaching for something already lost. Callan Ryder moved fast. Through the ruins, the heat burning his skin and the ash sticking to his clothes. He had been salvaging scraps when the explosion hit, but he stayed longer than he should have, because something didn't feel right. The Empire didn't just abandon places like this without reason. And then he heard it, faint, a sound that didn't belong to the fire or metal tearing apart. It was high-pitched and broken, like a cry trapped in a throat too small to scream. Properly, Callan froze. Another gust of heat rushed past, but he turned sharply, listening. There it was again, closer now. A cross between a growl and a whimper, soft but sharp. He pushed aside a broken piece of hull plating and found a twisted cargo crate underneath. The door was half melted, but he pried it open with a crowbar. Inside, curled in a corner like a wounded animal, was a cub. Its fur was black and silver, slick with blood and dirt. Yellow eyes burned with fear and fury. Its teeth were long, too long for a creature this small. One paw was caught under twisted metal. Callan's gut told him to walk away. This was a Drano cub, no question. A predator species bred for war by the Empire. Ruthless, dangerous. Everyone feared them, and for good reason. But this one didn't leap at him. It didn't snarl. It just looked at him, trembling and silent now, as if already giving up. Callan remembered the war. He remembered his brother, dying alone in a crater. He remembered leaving a field hospital full of wounded children. His heart clenched. Without thinking, he reached out slowly and said, "Easy, kid." The cub didn't move. Callan bent down, keeping his eyes locked with the creature's, and carefully lifted the metal off its paw. The cub flinched, but didn't bite. "Not yet." "You're lucky I'm stupid," Callan muttered as he wrapped it in his old jacket. It was heavier than it looked. He carried it back to his small ship, every step through the ash-covered jungle loud in the silence of a dead outpost. Inside the ship, the cub sat motionless on the floor, while Callan dug through a medkit. He wasn't trained for alien biology, but he could stop bleeding. He cleaned the wound with gentle hands. The cub twitched, but stayed still. "You need a name," Callan whispered as he applied a sealant foam. "I'm not calling you thing or beast for the rest of your life." The cub blinked slowly, watching him. "Ro," Callan said. "That's short. I like it." He looked at Ro again, wondering if he'd gone crazy. Bringing a Dranic cub onto his ship? The Empire would brand him a traitor. Most humans would. Run the second they saw it. But the creature in front of him wasn't a monster. It was a child. Alone. Abandoned. Just like he had been. Callan sat down across from Ro, letting out a long breath. "You're safe now," he said. "I think." Ro made no sound, just lowered his head and closed his eyes. Callan smiled weakly, leaning back against the wall. "Don't make me regret this, buddy." He closed his eyes too, exhaustion finally catching up to him. The fire outside had faded to embers, but the storm inside had only just begun. Just as sleep pulled him under, he felt movement. Ro crept closer, slow and careful, and then curled up beside him. A low, shaky sound came from the cub's chest. Not a growl, not a warning, something soft, like trust. Callan's lips twitched into a faint smile. "Good boy," he murmured. But the peace didn't last long. A sharp pain exploded in his arm. His eyes snapped open just in time to see Ro's jaws clamped around his forearm, teeth sunk deep, eyes wild with confusion and panic. Callan cried out, trying not to shove the cub away too hard. Ro backed off immediately, blood dripping from his muzzle, whimpering like he hadn't meant to do it. Callan clutched his bleeding arm, his vision blurry with pain. "Okay," he hissed. "So we've got trust issues." Ro stared at him, body low to the floor, ears back. Callan couldn't tell if it was fear or regret or both. He pressed a gauze patch to the wound and forced himself to breathe slowly. The cub had reacted on instinct. He wasn't safe. But Callan couldn't turn back now. He looked at the creature he'd just named and said through clenched teeth, "You bite me again, and I swear, I'll bite you back." Ro blinked, tilting his head. Then, to Callan's disbelief, the cub made a sound that almost sounded like a soft grunt of agreement. Callan chuckled bitterly. "Yeah, you're gonna be trouble." Outside, the jungle grew darker as night fell over the ruins of the Empire's forgotten station. Inside the ship, a wounded man and a frightened cub watched each other with wary eyes, and the first bond of something strange, dangerous, and unspoken began to form. Asterisk, the world was spinning. Callan opened his eyes and realized he was lying on the floor of the ship, his body cold and damp with sweat. His arm throbbed with pain, and when he looked, blood had soaked through the bandage. He groaned and tried to sit up. "Ro?" he called out weakly. The corner where the cub had been resting was empty. His heart jumped. The airlock door was wide open, wind whistling in from the jungle outside. Callan forced himself to stand, gripping the wall for support. He stumbled to the doorway and scanned the jungle. No sign of movement. "Ro!" he shouted, louder this time. "Come back," silence answered. Just the rustling of leaves and the distant cry of jungle birds. Callan cursed under his breath. He didn't know why it mattered so much, but it did. That cub had trusted him for a second. He couldn't let that go. He grabbed a med injector from the emergency kit and stabbed it into his leg. A rush of chemicals steadied his breath. Then he strapped on his old utility vest, took a shock baton, and stepped into the wild. The air was thick and wet. Vines twisted between glowing plants, and insect wings buzzed like tiny motors. He moved fast, following the only clue he had: deep paw prints in the soft soil. They were uneven, one dragging slightly. The cub was limping again. "Stupid," Callan muttered to himself. "Stupid for biting me. Stupid for running off. Stupid for making me care." After half an hour of hiking, he found blood on the leaves. A little farther, he spotted Ro collapsed near a tree root, panting hard, his body trembling. Callan rushed forward, kneeling beside him. "You idiot," he whispered, his voice tight. Ro's eyes opened slightly, but didn't focus. His fur was slick with sweat, and Callan saw the bite two small punctures on the cub's shoulder, red and swollen. Poison. The jungle was full of it. Callan didn't have the right meds, but he wasn't about to leave the cub here to die. He wrapped Ro in his jacket again, ignoring the pain in his own arm, and carried him back through the undergrowth, heart pounding with fear. Back in the ship, he laid Ro gently on the workbench and connected a medical scanner. The display blinked red. Neurotoxin. Not lethal to adult Dranok. Maybe, but for a cub this size, it was killing him fast. Callan didn't have the antidote, but he had a gamble. He rushed to his stash and pulled out an old trans-species stabilizer, a banned drug left over from his war days. It was experimental, barely tested, and not meant for creatures like Ro. Still, it was something. Callan pressed the injector to Ro's neck and pulled the trigger. The cub jerked once, then went still. Minutes passed, then Ro twitched. A small noise came from his throat, half cough, half growl. His breathing evened out. Callan let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. "Don't do that again," he whispered. "Don't make me think I lost you." He sat beside the bench until he dozed off, head resting near Ro's paw. When he woke up, Ro was staring at him. Callan blinked, then smiled. "Welcome back." The cub didn't growl or bare his teeth. Instead, he sniffed the air and slowly reached out his nose toward Callan's injured arm. The man winced as the cub's snout brushed the wound, then gently licked it once. Callan didn't move. He felt something shift inside him, like a tiny wall between them had just crumbled. "So," he said softly, "you trust me now?" Ro blinked, then curled his tail around Callan's foot. The meaning was clear. Over the next few days, the ship became more than a shelter. It became a home for both of them. Callan repaired systems while Ro watched, mimicking his hand movements. The cub ate from his own bowl now, growled softly when scared, but didn't bite again. Callan spoke to him often, even when he wasn't sure Ro could understand. He told stories about Earth, about the war, about his brother. He even laughed once when Ro tried to mimic his voice, an awkward, croaky sound that made the cub sneeze. But things weren't perfect. One night, Ro suddenly snapped at the mirror in the hallway, mistaking his own reflection for another predator. He lunged so hard, he shattered the glass. Callan had to calm him down slowly, placing his hands gently on Ro's shoulders. "It's just you," he whispered. "You're safe here. You're not what they made you to be." Ro stared at the broken glass, then at his own reflection in a piece on the floor. For a long time, he just looked at himself, confused and unsure. Asterisk. That was when Callan realized something important. Ro wasn't just a cub. He wasn't just an animal. He was learning, growing, trying to understand who he was. And maybe, just maybe, Callan was doing the same. But peace didn't last long. Early one morning, Callan was outside the ship gathering supplies when he heard a low, rumbling growl behind him. He turned slowly and froze. 3 massive figures stepped out of the jungle, their armor cracked and spiked, eyes glowing in the dim light. Adult Dronok warriors. One of them pointed a jagged blade at Callan's chest. "The cub is ours," he growled. "You stole blood from the Empire." And just like that, everything changed. Asterisk. The jungle held its breath. Callan stood frozen, staring at the 3 Dronok warriors. They were huge, twice his size, built like tanks, with black armor fused to their scales. Their claws looked like knives, and their eyes burned with the same golden fire he'd seen in Ro, but colder, crueler. The leader stepped forward and growled low. "You have what belongs to us. The cub is Dronok blood. Surrender him now." Callan didn't move. Behind him, he heard the soft shuffle of paws on metal. Ro had come to the airlock, standing half-hidden in the doorway of the ship. He looked smaller than ever, still limping slightly, still healing. But his eyes locked on the adult warriors with something that wasn't fear. "Not anymore." Callan raised his hands slowly. "He doesn't belong to anyone. You left him to die in the wreckage. I saved him." The second warrior hissed, stepping forward. "You are not his kind. He is ours. You defiled his blood." The third one didn't speak. He simply drew a curved blade and pointed it at Ro. That was the final straw. Ro leapt down from the ramp, landing between Callan and the warriors. He bared his teeth, his fur rising, a deep growl building in his throat. The Dronok leader laughed. "He defends the human. Pathetic." The air crackled. Callan didn't want to fight, but he knew it was coming. He drew his shock baton and stepped beside Ro. "You'll have to go through me," he said. The leader didn't hesitate. He lunged. Chaos exploded in the clearing. Callan dodged the first strike, barely. His baton cracked against the side of the warrior's leg, electricity arcing through the thick armor. It only slowed him down for a second. Ro attacked from the side, fast and vicious, claws sinking into the second warrior's arm. The third. One grabbed Ro and threw him hard against a tree. Callan screamed, swinging wildly to stop him. The fight was messy, brutal. Callan took a deep gash to the side, blood pouring down his shirt. Ro was limping again, but he kept fighting, teeth snapping. For soaked in sweat. It wasn't until Callan used the emergency flare blinding red light and smoke that the warriors finally pulled back. They regrouped, growling, their leader bleeding. From his side, "This is not over," he hissed. "The Empire watches. You've made your choice." And then, like ghosts, they melted back into the jungle, their shapes vanishing among the trees. Callan dropped to his knees, panting hard. Ro limped to his side and pressed his head against Callan's shoulder. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Inside the ship, Callan cleaned the wound on his side, biting his lip to keep from yelling. Ro sat quietly nearby, ears twitching, tail wrapped around his own paws. Callan looked at him and smiled weakly. "You saved me," he whispered. "You crazy little monster. You saved me." Ro tilted his head, then reached out gently and touched Callan's injured side with one paw soft, careful. Callan almost cried. Not from pain, but from something else. Something warmer. "You're not a weapon," he said quietly. "You're better than them. You chose to protect me." For the next 2 days, they repaired the damage. The ship's outer panel was smashed, half the tools scattered, blood still staining the ramp. But Callan didn't care. All that mattered was that Ro was alive. He ate more now, rested more, and watched Callan with bright, sharp eyes. One night, as the stars came out over the jungle, Callan sat outside on the wing of the ship, watching the sky. Ro jumped up beside him and curled close. "I don't know what happens next," Callan admitted. "They'll come back. Or worse, the Empire will send others." Ro didn't answer, but he leaned his head on Callan's knee. The peace shattered the next morning. As the sun broke over the horizon, a loud, crackling sound filled the air. The ship's long-range sensor, once broken, now reconnected, came to life. A voice echoed through the speaker. "Cold, robotic, unregistered life form detected on Urex 3. Confirmed match with forbidden species. This is an Imperial enforcement alert. Prepare for compliance. Surrender the creature." Callan's heart dropped. He ran to the cockpit and stared at the radar. 3 massive dots hovered in the upper atmosphere. Imperial destroyers. He turned to Ro, who stood beside him, silent and still. "They found us," Callan whispered. "And they're not here to talk," the voice repeated, louder now. "You are harboring a Class 3 predator species. That is a violation of intergalactic law. Prepare for immediate detainment or termination." Callan slammed his fist on the console. "No," he said. "No, I won't give you up." Ro growled low in his throat, standing tall for the first time. Callan looked at him, and at the controls. The ship's engines were still half repaired. They wouldn't make it far. But they had to try. He turned to the cub. "Ro... do you trust me?" The cub blinked once, then stepped onto the control panel and pressed his paw to the interface. The screen flickered, then shifted. The lockdown system, a hold from the Empire's eye started to dissolve. Callan stared in disbelief. "You single quotes read ... overriding it?" Ro didn't look at him. He kept pressing, claws moving with strange precision. Somehow, his body was reacting with the ship's old Imperial systems. "You genius little freak." Callan breathed. "You're saving us again." The engines roared to life. The ground shook. Outside, the jungle birds screamed and flew into the sky. Callan grabbed the controls, heart racing. "Hold on," he shouted. Ro braced himself near the co-pilot's seat as the ship lifted off with a groan. They broke through the trees, soaring into the golden sky toward danger, toward the unknown. They weren't running anymore. They were fighting together, and someone, somewhere, was watching. The sky above Urex 3 was filled with shadows. 3 enormous Imperial destroyers floated just beyond the atmosphere, black and silver like monsters. From an old war story. Their presence made the stars look smaller. Inside his ship, Callan gripped the control stick, sweat running down his back. Beside him, Ro crouched on the co-pilot's chair, alert and silent. Warning lights blinked across the control board. Red, yellow, red again. A cold voice came through the ship's comms, repeating its demand. You are in possession of a Class 3 Predator. This is a violation of Galactic Code 47. Power down and prepare for boarding. You have 60 seconds. Callan didn't move. He stared at the countdown on the screen. 58, 57. His fingers hovered over the controls. They had barely escaped the jungle. The engine was still shaky. Shields were weak. If he tried to run, they might be blown out of the sky in seconds. But if he surrendered Ro, that wasn't going to happen. Callan looked at the cub. Ro stared back with calm, glowing eyes. Not afraid, just waiting. I said I wouldn't give you up, Callan whispered. And I meant it. He flipped. The cone switch. This is Callan Ryder, independent salvage operator. The creature you're looking for is not a threat. He's just a cub, injured, alone. He's not your enemy. Silence followed. Then the cold voice returned. That species was designed for war. They are banned. If you do not comply, you will be treated as hostile. Callan's jaw clenched. He shut off the comms and turned to Ro. They don't care who you are. They only care about what you are built to be. Outside the window, the sky flickered. A beam of scanning light passed over the ship, harsh and cold. They're locking us down, Callan muttered. Remote override. We're stuck. Ro growled softly. He walked over to the ship's central panel and placed his paw on it again. The screen flickered once, then twice. Then it changed. Symbols shifted. A different interface appeared, one not made by human hands. Callan watched. In disbelief. You're doing it again, he said. How? How do you know this tech? Ro didn't answer, of course. But something in his body, something in his blood, seemed to connect with the ship's old Imperial systems. Callan's ship had once been part of a war fleet long ago, before. He'd bought it as scrap. Maybe that was why Ro could talk to it. Or maybe it was something more. Either way, Ro was rewriting the controls, overriding the lockdown. Callan grinned, breathless. You brilliant little beast. The ship jolted. Systems came back online. Engines warmed. The lockout signal was gone. Callan jumped into the pilot's seat. Hold on, he shouted. The ship blasted forward, engines screaming. Behind them, one of the destroyers fired, but the shot missed, hitting a mountainside below in a flash of fire. Callan steered through the clouds, diving low across the surface, weaving through canyons and lightning storms. The jungle below became a blur. Alarms screamed. But they were free for now. After 20 minutes of high-speed flight, Callan found a narrow cave system near the southern ridge and dropped the ship inside. The metal scraped against the rocks as they landed hard. He killed the engines and leaned back, heart pounding. Ro sat calmly at his side. I can't believe we made it, Callan whispered. You saved us again. Ro blinked once, then yawned like a lazy cat. Callan laughed, a little too loud, full of relief and fear mixed together. Callan looked at Ro. What do you think? Ro blinked slowly, then walked toward the comm panel and pressed his paw to it. The signal grew stronger. Callan raised an eyebrow. That's a yes, huh? He leaned forward. All right. Give me coordinates, the voice replied. Sending now. Meet us at Site Theta, edge of the southern desert, and bring the cub. He may be the key to everything. Callan stared at the screen as the data came through. Site Theta, an old rebel outpost. Long abandoned, or so he thought. The Empire would be tracking them. But maybe, just maybe, this was a way out. A way to protect Ro. Maybe even a way to change everything. Then the ship rumbled. Ro growled, low and tense. Callan checked the scanner. A small tracking drone had just flown over the cave mouth. Imperial. They were closing in? Again, he looked. At Ro. Time to move. And outside, the shadows of war were gathering once more. Asterisk. The wind roared across the southern desert, thick with sand and the smell of rusted machines. Old war relics lay half-buried beneath the dune's broken drones. Shattered armor, the bones of forgotten battles. Callan's ship skimmed low over the ground, engines whining from overuse, smoke trailing behind one wing. In the co-pilot's chair, Ro crouched low, alert and silent, his golden eyes scanning the horizon. They were almost at Site Theta. Callan checked the nav screen. One more ridge, he muttered. If this is a trap, we're already dead. The rebel outpost came into view, half buried in sand, camouflaged by time. Towers leaned sideways. Solar panels cracked and lifeless. But there were signs of power. A faint shield flickered over the entrance, just enough to keep out sandstorms. And scanners. Callan landed the ship near a rusted landing pad. The moment the hatch opened, two figures stepped out of the shadows, weapons drawn. One was human, a woman in dark armor with short hair and a scar over her left eye. The other was a tall alien with silver skin and 4 arms, each holding something dangerous. The woman stepped forward first. "You're late," she said coldly. "And you brought him." Her eyes locked on Ro, who stood beside Callan, tail low but unmoving. "His name is Ro," Callan said. "He's not a weapon, not anymore." The woman tilted her head. "No. One told you the truth, did they?" She lowered her gun. "Come inside. You both need to hear this." The inside of Site Theta was cleaner than Callan expected. Old tech lined the walls. Screens showed satellite maps, Imperial movement patterns, and genetic scans. Ro stayed close to Callan as they walked, his claws clicking softly on the metal. Floor. In a central chamber, the woman pulled up a hologram of a DNA sequence. "Ro isn't just any cub," she said. "He's special and dangerous to the Empire." She introduced herself as Saren Vale, a former Empire scientist turned rebel after she discovered what they had done to the Dranok species. She explained everything, how the Empire had once used the Dranok as bioengineered shock troops, how they were bred in labs designed for killing, stripped of emotion. But it hadn't worked, not completely. Some of the Dranok, especially the first generation, still had hearts, still had the ability to choose. Ro was one of them. He wasn't created, Saren said. He was born, naturally. That hasn't happened in decades. His DNA is pure, free from the control implants. That's why the Empire wants him destroyed. Callan felt like the air had been punched from his lungs. He looked at Ro, who stared at the glowing hologram of his own DNA. The cub didn't look scared, just confused. "So what?" Callan asked quietly. "You want to study him? Use him?" Saren's eyes were sharp. "We want to protect him. And maybe use what's inside him to shut down the Empire's control tech for good. His blood could be the key to freeing others like him." Ro growled softly, stepping back. Callan held up a hand. "He's not a tool," he said firmly. "You don't get to decide what he's used for." Saren didn't argue. "That's your choice." But you should know there are others out there. Other Dranok who were abandoned, forgotten. If we can break the chains in their minds, they might remember who they are, what they were before the Empire twisted them. That night, Callan sat outside the base with Ro. The desert wind was cool. Stars shimmered above them. Do you want to help them? Callan asked quietly. Do you want to find others like you? Ro looked up at him, then nodded once. Simple, certain. Callan smiled. All right then, we'll do this together. But peace didn't last long. Just before dawn, the base alarm screamed. Red lights flashed. Soldiers ran through the corridors. Callan grabbed his jacket and sprinted to the command room. Saren met him at the door. They found us, she said. We were careful, but they must have followed your jump signature. Imperial strike ships are inbound. Callan's stomach dropped. How many? Saren looked at the screen. 3 ships. Full squads. They're not here to talk. Outside, the desert sky lit up with streaks of fire. Dropships roared over the dunes, kicking up clouds of dust. Rebel cannons fired from hidden turrets, lighting up the sky with explosions. Ro stood on the landing platform, fur bristling, growling deep in his chest. Callan ran to him. We've got to go. Ro didn't move. He looked out at the horizon, eyes narrowing. One of the dropships had broken formation, diving straight for the base. A direct hit. No. Callan shouted, grabbing Rao and dragging him back as the impact wave hit. Fire, screaming metal, dust and heat. The platform exploded behind them. Callan was thrown against the wall. Everything went black. When he woke, alarms were still blaring. Smoke filled the corridor. He coughed, staggered to his feet. Ro? He called. No answer. Panic gripped his chest. Ro! He stumbled through the ruined hallway, heart-pounding dot. Then he heard it, a low growl, deeper than before. He turned the corner and saw Ro standing over the body of a dead soldier, teeth bared, claws soaked in blood. But his eyes were glowing brighter than ever. And in the middle of his forehead, something new pulsed under the skin. A soft, blinking light. A tracker. The Empire hadn't just followed them. They had marked Ro from the start. And now, they weren't just after him. They were coming for anyone who dared protect him. Asterisk. Smoke poured through the broken walls of Site Theta. Fires burned along the eastern towers, sending black trails into the desert sky. Alarms wailed, fading in and out, warning of a base already falling apart. Callan limped down the shattered hallway, coughing, blood on his face, and ash in his eyes. Ro! He shouted again, his voice cracking. Around him, the rebels were retreating, carrying wounded, dragging weapons, shouting orders no one could fully hear. The Empire had struck harder than anyone expected. Then he saw him, Ro. The cub stood perfectly still in the center of a ruined corridor, surrounded by bodies. Callan's heart dropped. Ro ... He whispered. The cub turned slowly. His claws were stained red. But what chilled Callan more was the blinking light on Ro's forehead. A small round bump beneath the skin glowed like a beacon, faint, but steady. A tracker. Planted deep, maybe from birth. Maybe long before the jungle. Saren appeared beside Callan, her face pale. They knew where he was the whole time, she said. That's how they kept finding us. Callan stepped forward. Can we remove it? Saren nodded slowly. Maybe, but not here. Not now. Outside, more explosions shook the walls. We have to leave. Now. They raced through the burning corridors. Callan carried Ro in his arms. He tried to walk, but he was weak now, exhausted. His small body shook, not from fear, but from something deeper, pain he didn't know how to express. Callan whispered to him the whole way. "I've got you. We're not done. We're not giving up." They reached the emergency hangar. Inside was a smaller ship fast, lightly armed, but still flight-worthy. Saren began programming coordinates. "There's a neutral planet Velen Prime. It's a sanctuary zone. No Empire access. If we can get there, we can hide, maybe even find someone to remove the tracker safely." More rebel fighters poured into the hangar. Gunfire echoed down the halls. The Empire was close seconds away. Callan laid Ro down gently in the passenger seat and turned to Saren. "What about you?" She shook her head. "I'll stay. I've bought you time. You get that cub out of here." Callan wanted to argue, but the look in her eyes said this was the end of her path and the beginning of his. "Thank you," he said softly. Saren gave him a half-smile. "Take care of him. And tell the galaxy what they did." Callan fired. Up the ship. The hangar door split open, wind howling through the gap. As the ship lifted, rebel gunfire met Imperial soldiers in the distance. Ro opened his eyes briefly. "We're going home," Callan said. "Where they can't find us." They blasted into the sky, away from fire, away from ruin, away from everything familiar. Ro lay quiet the whole flight, his chest rising and falling slowly. Callan watched him through the mirror, worried. The cub had saved him more times than he could count. Now it was his turn to return the favor. Hours passed. The stars blurred by. Callan flew mostly by instinct, eyes locked on the nav. Finally, a blue and green planet appeared on the screen. Velen Prime. A peaceful world, untouched by war, protected by ancient treaties. Callan sent a request for landing clearance. A moment later, a calm voice answered, "Clear to land." "Welcome, traveler." The ship broke through the clouds and touched down near a quiet field of golden grass. Tall white towers stood in the distance. Velen's neutral medical centers. Safe, quiet, clean. Callan carried Ro out of the ship and was immediately met by med-techs, aliens of all kinds, none from the Empire. One of them, a soft-voiced healer with 4 eyes, scanned Ro and frowned. "This will take time," she said, "but we can help." They took Ro inside. Callan followed, sitting beside the window as the med unit worked. He was allowed to stay nearby, to speak softly, to hold the cub's paw during the procedure. Ro didn't make a sound, but once, as the blinking light faded from his forehead, he turned his head slightly and pressed his nose into Callan's palm. 2 days later, Ro opened his eyes fully. The tracker was gone. The threat was over. For now, news spread quickly. Saren's team had uploaded the Empire's crimes to the public net just before the base fell. Footage of Ro. Files about the Dranok experiments. Clips of Callan's broadcasts from the ship. The galaxy reacted with shock and something more. Hope on Velen Prime. Callan walked with Ro beside him through the peaceful fields. No guards, no alarms, just wind and sky. Ro was stronger now. Bigger. Still a cub, but not helpless. Callan spoke softly as they walked. "You changed me, you know. I thought I was broken after the war, just drifting. But you gave me a reason again." Ro looked up at him and let out a soft sound, not a growl, not a cry. Something new, something gentle. Callan smiled. "You're not a weapon, you're family." Behind them, a reporter's drone hovered quietly, recording the 2 figures walking together, man and beast, human and predator. Not enemies, not fear. Just bond. And across the stars, people whispered the story of the cub left to die, of the human who refused to walk away, of how trust, once planted, could grow into something the Empire never expected. The human raised the predator, and the galaxy would never forget it. Asterisk the end.